Hi everyone, welcome to a new tutorial. I'm going to start the $4 one today, and I've chosen to draw a very cute little foal with colored pencil on pastel mat. So I got the suggestion to do a horse. That one I saw multiple times, and then I found this photo of this foal with very fluffy fur, which I haven't done yet on a Patreon. So let's do this foal. I'm very looking forward to it. It's a very cute little foal. And yes, I'll be working with colored pencil, but you can do it with pastels as well if you want to. The techniques are more or less the same. So if you don't have colored pencil, you can do it with pastel pencils. And I'll be leaving out the background. For this tutorial, I don't think the background is very important. So I want to focus on the foal itself, also to save a little bit of time. But if you want to put the background in, you can do that, of course, with pastels if you want to. So yeah, let's get started. I'm working on, I think this color is called light gray pastelmat. And I'll be working with the polychromos as always. So I have taped it down on my board. But this tape isn't very good. I lost my other tape. So I'll probably have to redo that multiple times throughout the tutorial. Yeah, use good tape because it comes loose if the tape doesn't really stick that well. Alright, so let's get started. I've already done the sketch. It's very light. I hope you can see it. I'll be zooming in on the eyes because I'm going to start off with the eyes. I've done the sketch with graphite and very lightly so it doesn't stain the paper too much. Then I've lightened the graphite sketch up with the eraser. And then the most important lines I've traced again with a bit of light gray pastel. So I keep the sketch as light as possible. And I've done the sketch by printing the reference photo. I colored the reference photo on the back with graphite. Then I place the reference onto my paper and then I just trace with graphite. And then basically you get that graphite from the background onto your paper, which gives a very nice line drawing on the pastel mat. I do that so I don't need to erase too much. I can freehand on pastel mat, but this saves a lot of time and I don't have to damage the paper by tracing or by erasing any wrong lines. Alright, starting off with the eyes. So the eyes are quite dark, the rest of the fur is quite light, but the eyes are quite dark, so I want to get that nice contrast in. And let's get started with a gray first. So I can go in with black, but let's do a dark gray, Payne's gray, just to outline the eyes a little bit. Or maybe I should go for a more warmer gray. Let's do dark sepia. I think that matches better with the fur and the rest of the eye detail. I'm taking dark sepia 175, making sure it's super sharp. And make sure to zoom in on your reference as well, so you can see all the lines and details in the eye. And then I'm going to carefully just outline all of the dark lines I see. Also the edge of the pupil. Super lightly with a very light hand. And then we have the edge of the iris. You can see a little bit of eye white next to it. I want to make sure that this line isn't too harsh looking, but I am outlining the edge of the iris right here. And then we have the eyelid, which starts right there. And then a top of the eyelid, the crease is above that. So I want to outline this very carefully so I have an exact idea of where everything is going to be. And that makes the coloring a lot easier as well. And then of course we have all those eyelashes overlapping the eye as well. The lashes are very dark or very long. Let's see if I missed anything. Don't think so. We have the bottom of the eyelid. Alright, so that's the start, that's the outline. And then I want to get started with a little bit of black, just to darken up some spots in the eye, like the corner. It can be a little darker. Top of the eye. Have a little highlight right there at the bottom of the eye, so leaving that open. Alright, so now I'm going to get started with a little bit of coloring already. I do see a bit of blue in the eye and a bit of purple as well. So I'm going in with Payne's Gray now for a base. And I'm keeping all the brightest colors for the final layers. Taking Payne's Gray, 181. I have to work with very sharp pencils as this is quite a small area. Let's do a little bit of the outlining. This edge of the eye is covered by lashes, but I do want to put it in a little bit. Then at the top we have a highlight, which I'm sketching out. And then in the center we have that pupil. The pupil of horses are always horizontally shaped. So it's a bit of an oval, rectangle-like shape. It's never completely. And I'm starting by carefully filling in the eye a little bit. Bottom of the eye is a little darker. I'm going in with black and adding very darkest shadows at the bottom of the iris. Right, not too much black yet. That will make the eye look a bit flat. Let's go in with a bit of gray, light gray, cool gray, number 3, 232. And I'm going to use this to do a base layer on the rest of the eye. So the lighter parts of the eye, the area right below the pupil, the highlight I'm leaving open for now. Also covering the top of the eye a bit more, which is going to be covered by lashes anyway, but I do need a bit of a base layer there. You can also use a lighter color to blend in the darker colors a little bit more. So when I go over the black with this, I can blend it in with the gray. All right. So now we can add a little bit more color. I do see some purple in there, so let's add some, or it's more like a violet. So let's add some violet, 138. And I'm adding this on the center of the iris. Just a bit of color. And then I'm going to switch to dark indigo, 157. With this I can add some more shadow. Just keep working circular motions with light pressure so you don't saturate the paper already. The whiskers, or the, what's it called? The eyelashes, I might save for later because we have to draw them on top of this area. The neck fur, so we might have to do the neck fur first before we can add the eyelashes on top. So I think I'm going to not do the eyelashes and save those for the very last. So the horsey might look a bit weird until then. A little bit of shading on the eyelid, the top eyelid. A little bit underneath the eye as well. And then let's add some brown. Some walnut brown, 177, to get some more warmth in the eye as well. Adding that on the pupil. All right, let's not forget to add that light highlight underneath the eye. I'm going to do that with white. Pull out some light. Let's add a little bit of white in this highlight at the top as well. And then to get more contrast in the eye, I'm going to add some black on the pupil and darken up some more shadows. So it's difficult to make this really, really black because we still have to draw the lashes on top. So I don't, I just have to leave some room for that. So I can't push too much. Alright, this eye is almost done. I do want to highlight the bottom of the iris a little bit more, so I'm going to add some, let's just do some white very lightly right here, just to lighten it up. And maybe a bit more dark indigo on the rest, like here, to darken that up. Make it blend in with the pupil a bit more. And then, of course, the white of the eye is never white. Let's do a little bit of beige red, 132, to get a bit of the pinky tone in there. I think that's enough. All right. I hope this is not a too large of a project for the $4 tier. I hope I can finish it on time. Little bit of sky blue in this highlight. That's 146 if I'm right. Yes, 146. Just a bit of color on the highlight. And then we can move on to the other eye. And then we're going to work on the fur. But first we do the other eye. The other eye reflects some of the color from the environment. So you can see some green in it. So we'll add some greens, but first I'm going to fill in the darker areas again. Let's do that with Payne's Gray 181. So I'm going to fill in corner of the eye. Look closely at the shapes. And here we can do the lashes because we don't have to draw anything here. So we'll do the lashes right away when we're done with the iris. Alright, then you can see that the edge of the eye is very light. So let's put that lightness in right away. Gray or white might be too white. So let's do cool gray 1 to start with. Let's outline that eye. A little bit of white maybe. And then we can start filling in. Or maybe a little bit of black before we start. A little bit of black right there, just underneath the eyelid. And then here in the corner. Not too much. Alright, I'm taking Payne's Gray again. 181. And with this I'm going to just sketch in that pupil. Don't draw it all the way to the edge. We want that glassy effect. So I want to keep that light edge open, not draw the pupil all the way to the edge. A little bit of shading in the corner. And let's give the top some shading as well. Pupil a little bit darker. But I keep my pressure very light. Alright, and then I see some green in there, but I don't want to put too much green. So let's start with the base layer of Cool Gray 3 again, 232. Or what's it? Yeah, 232. Which is going to prevent the green from getting too green. You can use this as a blender as well. Alright, let's get a little bit of green. Bit of a muted green. So I think chromium green opaque 174 might be a good match. Let's add a little bit of that to the iris. Just a little bit. The pupil has faded a little bit now, but I don't really mind. I can enhance that again. Just a little bit of green, not too much. The green in the eye might make more sense when you do put in the background. So I'm not going too far with the green. Bit of dark indigo. Take that dark indigo to the corner as well. Alright, we lost the contrast in the eyes. I'm going back in with black. Now really enhancing the darkest parts. Pupil. Look at that shape. You don't see all of it because we see the eye from the sides now. Or from the front. The eyes are on the sides of the head, so you don't see all of the eye. Right, a little bit of highlighting right here on the bottom, doing that with a bit of blue for some more color. That's sky blue. And maybe enhancing that light edge of the pupil or of the iris again with a bit of white. Alright, so let's do the lashes. The lashes look a bit bluish. Let's start them off with dark indigo. quick motions. Look at the shapes of them. Not too much pressure. Make them look nice and soft. And then the ones overlapping the eye, I want to have a little bit lighter so that they pop out a bit more. Let's do that. Bit of sky blue for some color. And I'm going to pull out the lightest ones with a cool gray 1. Quite difficult to do it so small. And then I can darken up between the lashes again with a little bit of black. So there's still enough contrast. All right. I think I'm going to leave the eyes like that. I can give the eyelid a bit of a base tone with gray, cool gray 3. Maybe even a bit of cool gray 1 on top to highlight it, make it stick out from the background. So that's the eyes. Now we can move on to the forehead. All right, so let's start moving on with the fur. The eyes seem a little crooked, so they're not really on the same line. And it's the same as on the reference, but I think when the fur and the rest of the face start to come together, it will make more sense. So we'll just continue. And I'm going to start mapping out the direction of the fur. The fur starts out like there, right in the center, and then it goes towards the forehead, so upwards, and then here on the sides it goes to the right, and then to the bottom towards the nose, then on the left it goes towards the left, towards the other eye. So I'm just going to map that out first a little bit, so it will be easier to do the layering. And I'll start with warm gray, number 4 it is, I believe, number 7, number 273. So I'll just start out right there in the center, or a little more towards the right, like there. And then I'm just going to draw some lines to figure out the direction of the fur. So no coloring yet, just a little bit of shading and fur direction. And then we can start adding all the colors. So this is quite a neutral gray. It fits the brown tones in the fur well, so that's why I'm starting with this. All right, so all around, just drawing light lines. And then you have to look really closely at the direction of these hairs. All around. And then here on the forehead, the fur is quite long. But there around the eyes, it becomes very short. So there we have to shorten our strokes as well. First a bit curly here and there. So I'm not sure if you see that on camera. I do it very lightly, and this is just for your own understanding of how the fur goes. It's good to map it out so you don't make any mistakes when you do the real colors later. Then on the bridge of the nose, the fur becomes shorter as well, like around there. So there we have to change our strokes to very short ones. And then when you get to the side of the bridge of the nose, the fur goes more like downwards, diagonally towards the sides of the face. And then on the side we have a bit of shading. I'm just putting that in a little bit. Of course, on pastelmat it's very easy to go on top with another color. So we can spend a little more time on just mapping out the shading, the most important shadows, and the most important fur directions. You see multiple layers in the fur. So you see a layer of brown and then a bit of gray. And then again a layer of brown. Mapping out those darker lines you see in the fur, those darker shadows in between the layers. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to spend some time on this. And then we have the edge of the forehead on the transition towards the ear. Here we have a bit of a darker edge again. Just doing that with the same gray. Same on the other side. I'm constantly drawing little lines, so I'm not going to be drawing like harsh lines. Drawing hairs. little bit of shading on the outer edge of the face on the right side. I also see some cool gray in there, so I'm going to switch soon to a cool gray to also do some shading with that. But right here, especially here underneath the eye, I see some warm gray. Here I can add a bit more of that. Let's keep that edge quite tight. Still, I'm not adding much pressure because I still want to be able to go on top with other colors. And then this edge of the forehead is more brownish looking, so I'm going to skip that for now. Do a bit more of that fur direction on the other side. And here I see more of a cool purplish like undertone, so I'm not going to add any warm gray there. A little bit more right here. And then maybe a little bit of shading. So here from the eye we have a bone. The bone is casting a shadow. It's good to put that in there. All right, let's move on to another type of gray. Let's do a cool gray. I'm going for cool gray 4 to 35, not too dark. So I'm going to enhance some of those shadows. So here in the center, you also see a bit of a cool tone. So now I'm going to darken up those cool looking shadows in between the brown hairs. Right. So I make sure to not cover the whole area, but leave open some spaces in between my lines. And there I can put the brown tones in between later. This is quite tricky type of fur because it's not only brown, you see a gray undertone in between the hairs. So that's what we're working on right now. Actually, it's not really brown either. So the neck is more brown looking, but the face is also a bit of a pinkish tone almost. So this drawing is probably going to take a lot more time than my usual $4 tutorials are. So I've already mentioned on Patreon that this will be the only colored pencil tutorial for this month, and then next month I will do the one that I had planned for the $7. But as I've been a bit stressed, a bit burnt out, I just couldn't manage to do them all this month. But this one is going to be quite a large one, so probably a good addition to the $4 tutorial range. And this first layer, these first two layers, they just take a lot of time. But it's quite important to spend that time on it because it will make the rest of the layering so much easier when you've created that map for yourself, basically. This will not be a one-part tutorial either. It will probably be 2 or even 3 parts. Here we have the transition into the forelock, which is also a bit cool grayish looking. So let's mark that edge of the forehead. And then we have the forelock right there. Like that. And then let's see where I can add more of this gray. A little bit more right there. And above the eye right here. On the edge. So this is a little bit of a bald space. There's not much hair there. So you see the skin. I'm just coloring that in very lightly. Keep looking at the shapes. Same goes for this part. It's very light here, so I'm leaving my pressures very, very light. All right, and then we'll get to the nose later. Let's finish this whole area first. I think we have a good base now. Yep, let's start a little bit more gray right there. Then we're going to start with the brown and the pink tones. I think it's the easiest to start off a little darker than I eventually want the fur to be. And then do the lighter hairs on top to get the most depth in the fur. So I'm going to get a brown tone. But there are lots of different shades in this fur. So I'll have to figure out what colors to pick. I'm going to need nougat probably. Walnut brown. And then for the pinky tones in the fur, I'm definitely going to be using beige red and cinnamon. Probably some violet as well. And I think I also need some burnt umber. Where have I left it? I'm not sure. There it is, burnt umber. Alright, so let's start with these shades I picked. And I think I'm going to go for the most neutral one first. So this is Nougat 178. And I'm going to lightly fill in between those gray shades I put in. Nougat's on the brownish side, but it still has a bit of a gray undertone to it. Keep an eye on the fur direction still. And with this nougat, I can fill up the edge of the forehead a little bit. That furry edge right there. Make sure it's not a harsh edge, but make some hair stick out. Made a little mistake here. Let's erase that. And I'm going to just lightly continue drawing hairs. On the darker places, I can go a little bit darker with my pressure, just so we don't lose those shadows. right. Just continuing, making sure that I have a base layer everywhere. This side will pop when this fur is done, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the left side yet. That will be way easier to finish and to judge when the dark fur next to it is done. On the bridge of the nose, fur becomes very short, so here my strokes change. I place them closer together and they are shorter as well. Still watch that fur direction. All right, so we're almost done with this layer of nougat. So now I think it's important to put a bit more contrast in the fur already. So I think I'm going to let's do walnut brown, a very dark neutral brown. And I'm going to use this to hype up the contrast a little bit, the darkest shadows in between the hairs. I've done that already with the gray. Now I can go over the gray with the brown to also give the gray a bit more depth and to make this a bit darker looking. That gray underneath will still show through. Walnut brown is number 177, by the way. Focusing a bit more on that layering now, so you can see multiple like layers. Here we have a bit of a line, and there we have a bit of a line, which I'm going to try to pull out with the gray, with the brown right now. And it doesn't need to be perfect because you can go over it with the lighter colors. Darkening up the transition into the ear. Alright, so now the fur is starting to get a lot more depth already. So I think we need some more colors, some other colors. Starting to look real brown right now. I need more reddish tones and I need more pink tones. So now we can start adding some of the pink tones. Actually, I think I'm going to be adding some Venetian red, number 190. But I'm going to glaze. So I'm going to give the fur a slight reddish tone with the Venetian red. So I'm basically going to just add almost no pressure. I'm holding the pencil very lightly and more towards the edge. I can make it slightly red. I'm going over everything. It doesn't need to be evenly. Here and there you see some more red. I don't want too much of a difference, so that's why I add so little pressure. And I still need enough room on my paper to do the lighter detailing later. Alright, so that makes quite a nice difference. The fur has a lot more depth now when it comes to color. And we also need some base layering right there. So here the fur is quite short, bit pinkish looking. So I'm going to add some cinnamon. Cinnamon is number 189. Keeping it light. And I also see the cinnamon on the forehead, so I'm going to add that as well. I'm working a bit more on filling up the paper so you don't see the gray from the paper showing through anymore. All right, then I also think we need some more gray. I'm going to get some warm gray, number 3, 272. With that, I'm going to fill up the skin around the eyes. So the layering on this horsey is just very subtle. Eventually, when we're adding the highlights, the fur will start to pop, but right now it's just very subtle, very soft looking. You can also use this color to fill up the tooth of the paper a bit more. Alright, so let's put in some of the lights. You can see here that the edge of the eyelid is very light. I'm doing that with cool gray number 1. That's 230. So a little bit of highlighting here and there. Where the fur's a little lighter. You can see here some gray hairs as well. Alright, so now I'm going to really darken up the darks. You can see that these dark patches are not dark enough yet. They can be a lot darker. I also see some blue here and there, so I think I'm going to work with dark indigo now. Also for a little bit more interest in the fur. It's still quite flat looking. So let's get some dark indigo. Let's see if this looks nice. I can always combine it with Caput Mortem Violet if I want it to look more brown in the end. But let's start with this, 157. Starting from the center again and working outwards. I think that looks quite nice. So let's continue with this, adding a bit more shading in between the hairs. Alright, I'm going to combine it with a little bit of Caput Mortem Violet. They fit each other very well. So this is 263. Just add a little bit on top of my dark indigo lines. That purple also gives a really nice depth to the brown fur as well. So let's add a little bit of that, or actually quite a bit. I always like to add this color. Okay, so now we're going to just keep building up. It's almost time to put in the lighter fur as well, the lighter hairs. I think I need a little bit more base layering first. So let's work on that. Maybe just a little bit more Nougat, the color we started out with, the 178. Just to densen up the fur. Now focusing on the base layering again. It's all about lightly building up and not losing your patience. Maybe add a little bit of burnt sienna to 83. This is a more opaque and vibrant color, so I don't want to put in too much of this. I think it will give a nice touch to the fur. Just a bit more of a reddish tone. And then I want to go back to that warm gray we started with, the 273. Do a bit more base layering on the skin right here. Just fill that up. Alright, I want to continue bringing a little bit more depth in the fur. So I'm going to get dark sepia 175. Let's do a little bit more darkness in between the hairs. So I really want to work on the density of the fur. Right now it doesn't look very dense yet. It's still very transparent looking. Darkening up the shadows in between the hairs. little bit of detailing above the eye. And there's not really fur here. It's very short little hairs. So I'm almost like putting down dots. A little bit more definition in those wrinkles as well. Try to not linger on one small area for too long. I try to skip around. Slowly the drawing will start to come together. I think we're almost ready to start pulling out some of the lighter hairs in the fur. So I really want that rough look, that wild look of the hairs. So I need to pull out some lighter hairs. Really watch that direction, make them nice and curly looking. I'm going for beige red to start with, 132. Let's see if this looks nice. I'm trying to go in between the darker lines I just put down. I'm trying to not make the hairs very straight. They're quite curly, especially here in the center of the forehead. I'm trying to mimic that a little bit. So these are not the lightest hairs yet. So we don't need to push that hard as either. On the bridge of the nose, the hairs are getting shorter. Don't want to put in too much pink either. I want a nice balance between pink and yellow tones, so I think I will also use a little bit of ivory, probably. Or maybe I can add a little bit more of the yellow tone. I'm going for Bister 179. Just do some glazing. I want to bring back some of the yellow. So I can just go lightly on top of some areas, not everywhere. Also get some of the golden glow on the fur. Like that. And maybe a little bit of Caput Mortem Violet. So I'm just going to slowly darken up because this whole fur, it needs to be darker and denser, but I need to keep using a light hand so I don't saturate the paper. All right, let's go in with a little bit of ivory. We're going to start working towards the lightest hairs. Saving the white for last. Keeping the hairs a bit curvy. Watch the fur direction. Alright, so now first getting more dense. Now we're putting in those light hairs. So here the edge of the forehead, it can use some more lightness, otherwise it will just fade into the background. So I will light it up. Alright, we're getting there. So in the center, you also see some very white hairs just sticking out. So we're going to add those with white. Number 101. Let's look at those, see where they're coming from, and then draw them quite quickly. Don't hesitate. They don't need to be perfect. I really like that about this horsey. Those white hairs. Very fun to draw. Alright, and then on the rest of the forehead, also putting in some of those white ones. And this white will not be entirely opaque, but if you've done the layering with a light hand, you'll be able to draw them on top quite nicely. This area still needs some work as well. We'll get to that. Alright, so now we're getting somewhere. So now I want to start bringing in the dark a little bit more and the color. So I think I'm going to do some more glazing first. I feel like it lacks a bit of red. I think I'm going over again with Venetian red, number 190. Bring some of that red vibrancy back. Not going around, not going over the white hairs. I'm going to skip those. The rest I'm giving a bit of red. Right. And then I also want to add some violets, 138 on this area to give this skinny area a bit more depth, not just gray. Make it nice and colorful. Alright, I'm going back in with a little bit of walnut brown. And separate the hairs a bit more, especially on this area. Just adding some more dark. So now I'm really going into the details. All right, we're getting there with this part, and then this will be part 1. Quite a long part. This we will finish when we get to the neck area. And then in part 2 we will finish this part and also the little nose. And probably the ears as well. I'm going to split it up 3 parts, this drawing. Let's see. Maybe going in one last time with some lighter colors and pulling out the final details. Going in with a bit more beige red. Right, one this time, a little bit white. All right, this is part 1. Let's move on to part 2.